Akhandam Satchidanandam Avang Manasagocharam Atmanam Akhiladharam Ashraye Bhishta Siddhaye. I take refuge in the self, the indivisible, the existence, consciousness, bliss, absolute, beyond the reach of words and thought, and the substratum of all, for the attainment of my cherished desire. So in Vedantasara, we were on text number 131. This is the school of the Shunyavadins, the Madhyamaka school of Buddhists. Remember the context where the question was, who am I? And using that question, using the sort of the pretext, using it as a pretext, we are taking a quick survey of different schools of Indian philosophy. What are their views on the self? And remember, each one of them is presenting an argument for their view. What is the view of the self? What is the self? An argument for this, for their view, an experience which shows that we experience the self in the way they are seeing it, and finally some relevant support from the Upanishads. So this we have seen for all the different schools. And finally, before we come to the Advaita Vedanta, the hero of the whole drama, we have got the last one is the Shunyavadins, the emptiness people, the Buddhist school of Madhyamaka Shunyavada. And as I'd said, just like I did for the mind-only school, I'll stop here and take a little detour and go into some depth and explore this school a little bit, because it's very fascinating. And in some ways, it's like a mirror image, like a twin of Advaita Vedanta in some ways. So it's good to take a look. And I also have a personal fascination for it. But by the way, you don't need to do this. Actually, when you teach this text, one does not go into such depth. If you did do that, you could have done that for every school. Each one of the schools which we happily swept past, they have very ancient histories, a huge amount of literature, a lot of interactions with other schools, many masters. So we just overlooked all of that. But this I'm stopping personal fascination, but also because many people who know a little bit about this school, they find it very intriguing how similar it is to Advaita Vedanta. So that's why we are stopping for a while. Today also, I have prepared a short presentation for which I shall share the screen, and I'll talk for a while, present on information dump. Whatever I want to say, I'll say to you, and then you can ask questions. And as I go on saying, in fact, that will be a good idea. As I go on saying these things, do keep writing comments, observations, questions in the chat. So let me start. Let me share the screen. The name is Shunyavada Buddhism. Shunyavada, Shunya means empty, or in Sanskrit just means zero or nihil, nothing. And Vada is a view or a school, the school of emptiness. One of the schools of Mahayana Buddhism. It is a philosophical school. And we know from last time the four major schools were the Sautrantika, Vaibhashika, the Yogachara Vijnanavada, which we did 2 classes back, and the Madhyamaka Shunyavada, which we're going to take a look at today. So the central figure here is Nagarjuna, who lived in the region of Andhra in India. He lived about 2000 years ago in the 1st century CE, about 500 years after the Buddha himself. It's so important in Buddhist philosophy, at least, that he's called the second Buddha. His main texts, his main works, many works are attributed to him, but mainly there is the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, which is very, very important. It is probably the central work of Mahayana Buddhist philosophy. In fact, I can say that all of Tibetan Buddhism, the central philosophical work, there are other works, there are tantric works and many other kinds of works, but the central philosophical work is the Mula Madhyamaka Karika of Nagarjuna. Most of the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism is, philosophically speaking, a development of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. So this is one of the texts. This is the central text I'll talk about today. And in fact, this is also why the school is also known as Madhyamaka school. The Mula Madhyamaka Karika in English would translate into the root verses of the middle way. Mula, root, Karika, verses, Madhyamaka, the middle way, root verses of the middle way. This is also why the school itself is known as Shunyavada or Madhyamaka. The school is called Madhyamaka and the followers are called Madhyamika. Another text which is important is a much shorter text by Nagarjuna called Vigraha Vyavartini. The Vigraha Vyavartini here, it translates as the dispeller of disputes. Dispeller of disputes. The Mula Madhyamaka Karika is basically an attack on all other Buddhist schools. In fact, in one sense, it's an attack on all philosophies. The Vigraha Vyavartini is a shorter text, and it's an attack on the Nyaya school of Hinduism. The Suhrilleka, this is a shorter text, which it translates as letter from a well-wisher. So it's basically about ethics. It's a counsel to a king. And there's another text called Ratnavali, which is a mixture of ethics and philosophy. Anyway, we will concentrate on the two main texts, which is Mula Madhyamaka Karika and the shorter Vigraha Vyavartini, to get an idea of what Nagarjuna was and what he did. Okay, so a little personal introduction here. About 20 years ago, I was a novice in the training center for monastic novices in Belur Mutt, and browsing through the library, I came across Nagarjuna. I'd never heard of him earlier. I had no idea about what he was or what he had done. And I came across the Mula Madhyamaka Karika with an English translation and the Vigraha Vyavartini with an English, also with an English translation. And I was fascinated. And I thought, this seems so similar to Advaita Vedanta, but what does it mean? It's also very difficult. As we shall see today, after going through all of it, we'll still be puzzled about what Nagarjuna wanted to say. So I was puzzled. And I didn't know whom to turn to. So there was this one monk in Belur Mutt, one of the wisest people I have known, and one of the few people I personally considered to, who I personally met to be enlightened. So he's a very old Swami. His name was Swami Mokshadanandaji, Ram Maharaj. He passed away several years ago. He was not only spiritually very advanced, but he was very well trained in traditional knowledge, in philosophy. So I thought I'll ask him. I used to turn to him with all what I thought were the most difficult questions. You know, in my immaturity, I thought nobody else can answer these questions, so I should go to him only. So I went to him, and he was, you can picture him. He looked a little bit like Einstein, you know, with frizzy white hair and with twinkling eyes. He was ill most of the time in those days. He used to take oxygen about 7-8 hours in a day, but I never saw him complain, never saw him in a bad mood. He was always with a twinkling eye and a smile, and very affectionate, very profound. I mean, the few things he has ever said to me, I remember till today. So I went to him with this question. This is one of the times I went to him with a question. The question about what did Nagarjuna mean and how is it similar to Advaita Vedanta, or is it different? So I went and asked him. And with him, you had to ask the question, and then he would think, and you had to keep quiet, not interrupt him. He would give you an answer, which probably nobody else will be able to give you. So he said that many, many years ago, I was in Vrindavan. He was in Vrindavan. So I was in Vrindavan and in our ashram there. And we used to study under a scholar. And there was a young man who was doing his PhD in the University of Allahabad. He used to come also. And this young man, his PhD thesis was this subject you are asking about, the relationship between Advaita Vedanta and Shunyavada of Nagarjuna. And finally it was published, I think, from the University of Allahabad. And this young man's name was Chandradhar Sharma. So that's all he told me. And then I went on a search. Chandradhar Sharma, it turned out, became a major philosopher of post-independence India later on. And I found textbooks on Indian philosophy by Chandradhar Sharma, including chapters on Nagarjuna, where I think he had incorporated what he had written in that thesis, which he was writing when Ram Maharaj met him. So that was 70 years ago, 70, 75 years ago. And thanks to modern technology and Internet Archive, I actually found the thesis yesterday, the original thesis. I mean, the contents of that are already available in the textbooks, with textbooks written by Chandradhar Sharma later on. But the original thesis of Chandradhar Sharma, it's available on the net. So I found it yesterday, and I will quote to you a few portions from it, where he nicely summarizes Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika. And then we'll take a quick look at Vigraha Vyavartini. I had no idea that this thing which I found so fascinating 20 years ago, that 20 years later in America, in Harvard University, I would be studying the same texts, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. We did a full course on the commentaries, the Sanskrit and Tibetan commentaries to the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. And I myself have 4 or 5 translations of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika right now. And also the Vigraha Vyavartini. So I did 2 courses on this. One by Professor Garfield on Indo-Tibetan Madhyamaka, and another by Professor Parimal Patil on classical Buddhist philosophy, classical Indian Buddhist philosophy. So here we go. Nagarjuna, so this is one of the translations of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the most modern one, but there are others also. So it's called Nagarjuna's Middle Way. Now let me start with Nagarjuna's Mangalacharan. Mangalacharan is the invocatory verse, just like we did now, Akhandam Satchidanandam. So listen to what Nagarjuna, how he starts this book. Remember, his central philosophy of Buddhism, this one. So he starts the book by Mangalacharan. Anirodham anutpadam anuchedam ashashvatam anekartham ananartham anagamam anirgamam yav pratitya samutpadam prapanchopashamam shivam deshayamasa sambuddhastam vande vadatamvaram. I salute the Buddha, the greatest of teachers, who has taught this. Then he gives what he has taught. If you listen carefully, you will hear Mandukya Upanishad. Prapanchopashamam Shivam. The 7th mantra of the Mandukya Upanishad, this exact language is there. That Ekatma Pratyasaram, Prapanchopashamam Shivam Advaitam, Chaturtham Manyante, Sa Atma Savigneyaha. The same words are there. Prapanchopashamam Shivam. And not only that, if you see Nagarjuna, again, Gaudapada, you will be reminded of Gaudapada. Actually, if you read Gaudapada, you'll be reminded of Nagarjuna, because Nagarjuna came about 500 years before Gaudapada. Look at the first words, Anirodham, Anutpadam, that neither cessation nor creation. And again, it reminds you of Gaudapada's most stunning verse in the whole Mandukya Karika. Gaudapada's most stunning verse, Nanirodham nachotpadam nabadho nacha mumukshuhu nabadho nacha sadhaka na mumukshu nacha muktaha ityesha paramarthataha. Exactly same language. What does he say? Here in this invocatory verse, Nagarjuna has given the famous 8 negations, 8 things he has denied. The ultimate truth taught by Buddha. What is that ultimate truth? Is negative language he is expressing. There is neither any cessation nor creation. The 2 negations. The ultimate truth is not something that can ever come to an end, not something that ever begins. Just like Gaudapada said, na nirodham na chotpadam. Then he says, anuchedam ashashvatam. It is not nothing, nor is it an eternal thing, the ultimate reality. And then, is it one reality? Is it singular? He says this ekartham. No, anekartham. It is not one. So is it many? He says, no, it is not many also. And then is it something that comes and goes? He says, no, it is not something that comes. It is there is no coming or no going, ultimately speaking. So from the ultimate point of view, which Buddha has taught, these 8 negations, they characterize the ultimate teaching of the Buddha. Anirodham, anutpadam, anuchedam, ashashvatam, anekartham, Ekartham, ananartham, anagamam, anirgamam. And yah pratitya samutpadam, this dependent origination, prapanchopashamam shivam, the cessation of the universe, or the falsity of the universe, which is auspicious, Shivam. This has been taught by Buddha, the greatest of teachers. So this is what Nagarjuna says in the introduction to his Mula Madhyamaka Karika. And what is the Mula Madhyamaka Karika? What does it consist of? He uses his formidable logic to demolish all these concepts. There are 27 chapters. And in these 27 chapters in this book, what Nagarjuna has done is, he has destroyed the concepts of causality, cause and effect. That there is an external reality? No. That there are jivas, sentient beings like us? No. That there is something called matter itself? No. Even something as simple as motion, movement? No. Time, space, shunya, they're all empty. All right, fine, but at least you're a Buddhist. So what about Buddha? Buddha is also shunya. There's no such thing as a Buddha. What about the Four Noble Truths? Dukkha and nirvana? No, that's also shunya. What about nirvana, the goal of Buddhism? Shunya. What about bondage and liberation? Bandha and moksha, your the freedom from suffering? Shunya. Karma, that's the most central thing to all Indian philosophies. That's also shunya, empty. Now, what is this emptiness? I will quote from the thesis of Chandradhar Sharma to show how he attacks these concepts. All these concepts, how they are attacked and demolished. Very quick summary. I'll quickly read through certain portions and explain as I go along. So you can keep seeing this. I will just read out. Nagarjuna opens his work by boldly proclaiming the doctrine of no origination. Never and nowhere can anything be produced. Stunning claims. Nothing can ever be produced. A thing can originate neither out of itself, nor out of a not self, nor out of both, nor out of neither. This you will again keep coming and again in Nagarjuna. His arguments have a structure. Structure is called tetralemma, the fourfold chatushpad. That means the four options. There are four options in every problem, and he denies all four. For example, is there Atma? Suppose you say. So what are the four options possible? Yes, there is Atma, Asti. Or there is no Atma, Nasti. Or it is both there and not there in somehow. Atma is there and is not there. And the fourth one is the Atma is neither there nor not there. So is not, both is and is not, neither is nor is not. So these are the four options. And Nagarjuna denies all four. Is it true that the Atma is there? He will say no. Is it true that Atma is not there then? He will say no. Is it true that then Atma is both there and not there? No. Then it is neither there, neither not there? No, not even that. Then what are you teaching? This is Chatushkoti Vinirmukta Tattvam. I'm teaching you the truth which is free of the four alternatives. These four alternatives are called tetralemma. So again, you can see right here when he says a thing can neither originate from itself, nor from a not self, nor out of both, nor out of neither. Why not? I mean, you're making all these big claims. Can you give some reasoning? So a thing cannot arise out of itself. From the cause comes the effect. Cause means like seed, effect means like plant. Now, is the plant going to come out of, what will the plant come out of? Will it come out of itself? A thing cannot come out of itself, because if the effect is already existing in its cause, it is already an existing fact, does not require any production. A thing cannot come out of itself means a plant cannot come out of the plant itself, because then what would come out? It's already there. But if the effect does not exist in its cause, if the effect and the cause are totally different, then what will relate them as effect and cause? If the effect does not exist in its cause, nothing can produce it. So if the mango plant does not come out of a mango seed, there's no connection, then it can come out of an apple seed also? No, there must be some connection between cause and effect. And yet the cause and effect cannot be the same thing. This is again and again, Nagarjuna will use this. This technique is a thing can neither be identical to itself nor distinct, totally distinct from itself. This argument he will use. If a thing cannot arise out of itself, how can it arise out of a not self? Again, if you say a thing can arise out of both itself and not self, is to maintain that light and darkness can remain together. Impossible. And nothing can arise at random and be uncaused. So these are four alternatives, and he dismisses them. What is he dismissing here? The whole concept of causality. Very important concept to make sense of the world. All reasoning, all science, it all depends on causal arguments. This causes that. This is the effect and that is the cause. He says it cannot happen. Let me give another example which from Nagarjuna. In the second chapter, he talks about motion is impossible. By this I mean something very simple. We are walking along a path. Nagarjuna says that is impossible. How? Motion is impossible. We cannot travel a path which has already been traveled, nor can we travel a path which is not yet traveled. And a path which has neither been traveled nor yet to be traveled is also not being traveled. The mover does not move. The non-mover, of course, does not move. What is the third then, which is neither a mover nor a non-mover which can move? Hence, mover, motion, and destination all are unreal. What does he mean by this? You have to think about it in terms of, for example, the way the philosophers thought in those days. So movement, walking, suppose something as simple as walking, gamanam, walking, it's an action. So the action must be happening somewhere. There must be a location for it. There must be somebody who is doing the moving and somewhere the moving is happening. So for example, there's a man who is walking on a path. That's a simple idea. Nagarjuna attacks this very simple idea itself. He says, you're seeing that action, the walking is happening on the path. On which path is the walking happening? It cannot be the path which has already been walked over. So now walking is going on. So the path which has already been covered, on that walking is not happening because that's done. The path which is yet to be covered, on that walking is not happening because that has not yet started. And then what about, there's no path right now in this particular instant. In one instant, there can be no walking there because the entire path is divided into what is gone and what is yet to come. Similarly, he says, where is the activity of moving? Who is moving, if you ask? Then Nagarjuna is saying, or let's use the word walking. Who is walking? Is the walker walking or is the non-walker walking? The one who is not non-walker means the one who is not walking. Is that one walking? You cannot call it that because that person is a non-walker. He is not walking. We'll reply, obviously the walker is walking. But remember the way the Nayayikas, for example, understood these things. What is walking? Walking is an activity. It must stay in a substance. A karma must be in a dravya. So there must be some kind of real entity which is performing that activity. So there is an activity, there is an entity who is the walker, and the activity is walking. So the walking is in the walker. But Nagarjuna says, what is a walker? Walker is a person with the quality of walking according to your definition. You define a walker as a man who is walking. Now, if you say the walker is walking, is he walking 2 times? Is it a very interesting thing he's doing? Walker means man with the quality of walking. Now, if you add one more, that the walker is walking, then one more activity of walking comes to be attributed to that man who's already got the quality of walking. So Nagarjuna says, Tarhi dvigamanam syat, he has to walk twice then. And he says, apart from the walker and apart from the non-walker, there is no third one who will be walking. So neither walking, neither the walker nor the non-walker is walking. There is no third person apart from the walker. There is where is the walking going on? Not in the path which has already been walked upon, not in the path which is yet to be walked upon. There is no other alternative. Hence, this whole question of motion does not make sense. Similarly, seer, seen, and sight are also unreal. Body, mind are also unreal. Remember, he uses the Buddhist term, skandha, pancha skandha. So, rupa skandha means physical body is unreal. If the body exists, it can have no cause because it's already existing. And if it does not exist, then too it can have no cause because a non-entity, non-existent thing does not require a cause. An uncaused matter is impossible. So matter or body is impossible. Similarly, Vedana skanda, the feelings, conception, sangya skanda, the past impressions, samskara skanda, and the individual awareness which we have, vijnana skanda, they are all unreal. The elements which constitute the body, earth, water, fire, air, and space, they are all unreal, shunya. And he goes on, individual self is also unreal, the jiva, which we are. It is neither identical with nor different from the five skandhas. What he means here is body mind. Now, if you say, I am an individual being, jiva, Nagarjuna is asking you, which one are you? Are you this body mind complex? If you say, I am the body mind complex, then by jiva you mean body mind complex. Why don't you say, I am a body? Why are you saying I am a jiva? It is like saying bicycle. Yeah. There is a bicycle. Now, which is the bicycle? Is it the parts or is it something apart from the parts? If you see the parts of the bicycle, there is no bicycle in the parts. There is an axle, there is a wheel, there is a handle, there is a seat, but there is no bicycle there. And if you say, no, it's not the parts, then apart from the parts, is there a bicycle? Of course not. Similarly, the body-mind complex, where is the jiva here? Is the belly the jiva, the head the jiva, or all the parts put together, is it the jiva? Apart from the body-mind, can you find a jiva? No. So there is no such jiva at all. If the ego, ahankara, be the same as the body-mind, then it too, like them, will be subject to birth and death. If the ego is different from the body-mind, it cannot be known. Where is the ego apart from body-mind? When the I and mind cease to function, the entire structure of the universe, subjective as well as objective, crumbles to the ground. The skandhas or body-mind no more operate. Buddha said, universe is beginningless and endless. And it is an accepted principle of logic. Nagarjuna says that if a thing does not exist in the beginning and in the end, it cannot exist in the middle also. Hence, beginning, middle, and end, birth, persistence, and death, Srishti, Sriti, Pralaya, are all equally shunya, empty, unreal. Not only the universe is beginningless, but all the objects which we experience are equally beginningless and hence middleless and endless. Change too is impossible. Same logic you can apply. Which is changing? Is the changeless changing? Impossible, because by the very nature of the changeless is not changing. Or is the changing thing changing? Then it will be changing twice. And apart from the unchanging and the changing, there is no third thing. What is changing then? If the changeless does not exist, then what is it that changes? And if a thing is changeless, how can it change? And if reality does not exist, then what is it that appears? And if it is reality, then how can it be an appearance? You say, then are you saying there is no reality at all? Nagarjuna says, I'm not saying that. Look, something is appearing. Here is this world. Then you say, oh, so the reality is appearing. But then if it is reality, how can it appear? Appearance means not real. Then he says, the subject and object and the subject-object relation are unreal. Action and its result are also unreal. If action really exists, it will be eternal and actionless, unchanging. Then all the phenomenal practices will collapse. Suffering, action, bodies, doers, and results, that means karma, are all unreal. They are like an illusion, a magic city, a dream, a mirage. Time is also unreal because past, present, and future are all relative. Even the Buddha is only an illusion. He is neither identical with nor different from the body-mind of the Buddha. The Buddha is also shunya. We cannot say whether the Buddha exists or does not exist or does both or neither, either after nirvana or before nirvana during his lifetime. The Four Noble Truths are also unreal. There is neither suffering, nor its cause, nor its cessation, nor the way towards it, of its cessation. Dukkha, Trishna, Nirvana, and then the Dharma. All of them, he says, they are all empty. The three jewels in Buddhism, Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. I take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the monastic order of the Buddha. Three jewels. He says the three jewels are also empty. There is neither the Sangha, nor the Dhamma, nor the Buddha. Nirvana itself is an illusion. Bandha and moksha are relative and therefore unreal. Neither the samskaras nor the ego can either be bound or liberated. See, the mind, Atma, even in Vedanta, if you did, Nagarjuna will ask, does the Atma require liberation? No. Can the Atma actually ultimately be in bondage? No. Can the mind be liberated? No. The mind is just an appearance within Maya. It can never be liberated. Can the body be liberated? No. If the body and mind cannot be liberated, what is the point of saying that they are in bondage? And they are just, appearances in Maya. So there is really no bondage, really no liberation. Neither is there this body mind, nor that which is not the body mind that can be bound or liberated. Neither that which is bound, nor that which is unbound, nor that which is both, nor that which is neither can be either bound or liberated. He who thinks, Nagarjuna says, he who thinks, transcending the body mind, I shall obtain liberation, is still entangled in the terrible clutches of the body mind. There is no bondage and no liberation, both are relative and hence unreal. When samsara is not destroyed, nirvana is not attained, why should samsara and nirvana be at all imagined? So he goes on like this. If nirvana cannot be existing, because then like all other existing things, it will be subject to birth and death. Nirvana cannot begin and end. If nirvana starts, then something that starts will end. Then what is the point of that nirvana? Moksha, we always say moksha is eternal. But then if moksha is eternal, it cannot start also. If it starts, it will come to an end. If it does not start, then you have to admit that moksha is either always there or never there. And then it will also have, moksha or nirvana will have a cause, and it will be based on the body and mind, like all other things. Nirvana cannot be non-existent too, for then it will not be independent, as non-existence necessarily depends on existence. Nirvana cannot be both existence and non-existence together, because the very concept is absurd and self-contradictory. Existence and non-existence are absolutely opposed like light and darkness. How can they simultaneously exist together? And then the fourth alternative, nirvana cannot be neither existence nor non-existence, for it is inconceivable. You cannot think of such a thing. So, so nirvana is only an appearance, not a reality, and so on. He goes on like this. This is a quick survey of Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, where the central thesis is Sarvam Shunyam. Everything is empty. Everything is empty. Sarvam Shunyam. Nothing has intrinsic existence. Now, in the other small book, Vigraha Vyavartini, Nagarjuna trains his logic on the Nyaya school, which was the other big school in his time, which is a Hindu school, one of the 6 schools of Hindu philosophy. Wait, let me see. So the Nayayikas, they attack Nagarjuna. They are saying, Sarvam Shunyam, everything is empty. How do you know? That is their question. See, the Nyaya school is a school based on Pramana Prameya. Pramana Prameya means that to claim anything, you must show how it is established. Pramana, what is the Pramana for it? Prameya means the things to be known. So Atma, Brahma, Samsara, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, all of these things are Prameya, things to be known. And you must say how you know these things. So how you know is called Pramana. I've translated this as epistemic instrument. A fancy term for Pramana. Pramana means like eyes are Pramana. This is Chakshusha, Pratyaksha Pramana, direct perception. Ears are Pramana, by which we experience sound. Eyes are Pramana, by which we experience form. Tongue is Pramana, by which we experience taste. The skin is Pramana, we experience touch. And there are other Pramanas, Anumana, which is inference. The Hindus accept the Shruti, the Upanishads as Pramana. So there are different kinds of Pramanas. Now, the Nayayikas say that to make any claim, you must say how you know this. If you say Atma exists, Brahma exists, we can prove it. I say that the Upanishad says so. I can give you some argument for it. Notice all these different schools which we are discussing, all of them, they gave some argument, they gave some anubhava experience, then they gave some quotation from the Shruti. So now the Nayayika is asking Nagarjuna, wait a minute, all these crazy things you are saying, how do you know all things are empty? By what pramana? If you say that I know it without any pramana, then we will not take you seriously. Without any pramana, one can say anything. And if you say I know it by a pramana, then at least one thing you have to say is non-empty. That is the pramana itself. By which pramana did you know that everything is shunyam? If you say that I know by some pramana, I know that everything is shunyam, then that pramana cannot be shunyam. If that pramana also is shunyam, then what it reveals is also is worthless. So if that epistemic instrument exists, then you have to admit, oh Nagarjuna, there is at least one thing which is not shunya, and that is that pramana. And then your claim, everything is shunya, becomes false. So this is the Nyaya counterattack against Nagarjuna. The basic question is, how do you know? Everything is shunyam, how do you know? That by which you know must not be shunyam. Then your claim is that all things are shunyam is not to be accepted. Nagarjuna's counterattack. This is you see in Vigraha Vyavartini. These texts were originally lost in India actually after the destruction of Nalanda University, but they were all preserved in Tibet, and they were translated by Tibetan lamas from Sanskrit into Tibetan language. And later they were translated back. The original Sanskrit was reconstructed and translated into English and other languages. I saw in the first book I came across, Vigraha Vyavartini, in the training center in Belur Math, was published from Vidushekar Bhattacharya, the great scholar. Rabindranath Tagore, he saw the importance of this, so he established an institute for Tibetan Buddhist studies in Shantiniketan, and he got some top scholars there to learn Tibetan and translate from Tibetan back into Sanskrit, into English, into Bengali. So one of those books, and it's very interesting when you see these books, Vigraha Vyavartini, the first part is the English translation. Then they will give you the Sanskrit. And then they'll give you behind that is the Tibetan. And the original Sanskrit, of course, is now lost. Now, Nagarjuna counterattacks. Remember the Nayayika attack. By what pramana do you know, oh Nagarjuna, everything is shunya? Nagarjuna's counterattack is this. Nagarjuna attacks the entire Nyaya philosophy. What is the Nyaya philosophy? The basic idea is you know things only by pramana. Pramana prameya. By the instrument of knowledge, by epistemic instruments, you know the things about the world. Nagarjuna asks, so by pramana you know things, right? The Nayayika says yes. How do you know the pramanas themselves? See, Nagarjuna, very interesting attack. He says all things are known by pramana. Very good. How are the pramanas known? Now, what are the alternative answers the Nayayikas can give? One answer is that the pramanas are established by themselves. One pramana establishes the other. Or the pramanas are self-established. These are different alternatives. I will show you how it does not work. Nagarjuna's answer to that. If one pramana is established by another pramana, you can immediately see what will be Nagarjuna's answer to that. If pramana X is established by pramana Y, then he will ask, what is pramana Y established by? Then you require one more pramana, and for that you require one more pramana. This is called infinite regress. In Sanskrit, anavastha dosha. You will never get to an answer, an end to this chain. So that is not possible. That pramana is established by another pramana. Then the Nayayika changes the track. He says, no. Pramanas are established by themselves. How? Well, like fire. Fire shines and it reveals the pot which was in darkness, but the fire reveals itself also. The fire illuminates the pot and the fire illuminates itself. Notice, this is similar to the consciousness arguments which we later Advaita Vedantins will use. Nagarjuna rejects it completely. What is the Nayayika answer? That pramanas establish themselves. Like fire illumines a pot, and fire does not require one more fire to illuminate. Fire illumines itself also. Nagarjuna says no. Illumining something. What is illumination? Prakasha. What is illumination? Something was in darkness. Then you brought the fire, and the fire removed the darkness and illumined the pot. Was the fire ever in darkness? Fire illumines the pot, correct. But the fire itself, was it ever in darkness? This destruction of darkness, removal of darkness is called illumination. So if the fire was itself never in darkness, how can you say the fire illumined itself? Do you see the subtle point Nagarjuna is making? Another thing Nagarjuna says, this is called self-reflexivity. A thing will operate upon itself. He says it is impossible. Knife cannot cut itself. Fire cannot burn itself. You're saying the fire operates upon itself, the fire illumines other things, and fire illuminates itself. The property of the fire is, the function of the fire is to illumine. But fire also has another property, burning. So does the fire burn itself? Fire can burn other things, it does not burn itself. Similarly, fire illumines other things, it does not illumine itself, at least not in the way it illumines everything else. So self-reflexivity is rejected by Nagarjuna. Then the Nayayika uses another approach. He says the epistemic instruments, pramanas, are established in relation to their objects. Our knowledge of the pramanas and our knowledge of the objects are mutually dependent. So the eyes reveal the objects and the objects reveal the eyes. This is Nayayika trying to wriggle out of a difficult situation. So the pramanas will reveal their objects, and the objects, by that the pramanas themselves are also revealed because of the objects. So Nagarjuna, he says that this is absolutely silly. He says, if the pramanas are self-revealing, or if they, if the epistemic instruments need epistemic objects, then they are not self-established. If fire reveals the pot needs the fire to reveal the pot, and if the fire needs the pot to reveal itself, then they are not self-established. If there is it leads to serious complication for Nyaya, because if the pramanas are in any way dependent on their objects, then how can they establish their objects? The pramanas, which are supposed to establish others, have now become objects, which are the ones to be established, and the objects have become instruments. What Nagarjuna is saying here is this: O Nayayika, now you are trying to say that the instrument of knowledge establishes its object, and by that the object also establishes the instrument of knowledge mutually. But remember how you had started earlier. You had started that the instrument of knowledge, pramana, is necessary to establish prameya. But if pramana is establishing prameya and the prameya is establishing pramana, then which is the pramana and which is the prameya? Now you have mixed up the definitions. The whole pramana prameya system will collapse if you say that. The father-son, Nagarjuna says that when father produces a son, in like that you are saying the pramana will produce knowledge. Nagarjuna asks, son is produced by father, but isn't it also true that the father is produced by the son, because the father becomes a father when the son is born? Before that he cannot be called a father. So he says, if the so for someone is a father only with respect to their children, in that case who is producing whom? Further, both being producers, father produces son and the son makes the father a father, then both are fathers. And both being produced, both are sons. This pramana and their objects become like this. Which is the pramana and which is the prameya? Which is the instrument, which is the object? Which one is the pramana? Which one is the vishaya? If both are complicit in their mutual status as instrument and object. So what Nagarjuna is doing, he is not actually denying that fathers have sons or the fire is illumining a pot, but he is attacking the Nyaya picture, the realist picture of the world, the philosophy of Nyaya he is attacking. He says your picture does not make sense. He says Shunyata sarva drishtinam, all philosophies are empty, and so on. Now, basically, what are Nagarjuna's methods? Very quickly we will see. If you see Mula Madhyamaka Karika, if you see Vigraha Vyavartini, he uses the range of subtle logical techniques to demolish the views of others. Basically, the techniques are like this. 5 basic techniques are there. One is infinite regress, which we just saw. Pramanas establish the pramayas. Nagarjuna asks, what establishes the pramanas? Another pramana is required to establish this pramana. Then you go further and further back and infinite regress happens. This is illogical. Then you will never get an explanation. This is one technique. Second technique is neither identical nor distinct. Remember how he attacked the idea of cause and effect. So is the effect different from the cause or same as the cause? Is the plant different from the seed or the same as the seed? If the plant and the seed are completely distinct, then the seed of an apple could produce an orange tree. But if they're not distinct, if they are in some way the same, then why should the seed produce a plant? The plant is already existing then, because they are identical. Not only that, more deadly logical consequence will be there. If cause and effect are identical, then the cause becomes the effect. And the cause becomes its own effect and effect becomes its own cause then, if they are one and the same thing. Another logical technique Nagarjuna uses 3 times, past, present, and future. So he shows something is not possible in the past, something is not possible in the future, and the present, he says it's the vanishing instant, one like one instant of time. So that it is not possible in the present. Like walking, he used the example of walking. Where is the walking going on? It cannot be in the path which has been traversed in the past, because that's already gone. It cannot be on the path which is yet to be covered, because that has not started yet. And this instant, there can be no walking because it's one instant in the present. So walking is not going on in past, present, and future. Where is walking going on? Similarly, uses the same thing for different kinds of activity or different cases. So uses time to attack various concepts. Then irreflexivity, like we saw the fire illumination. So when Advaitin says consciousness illumines itself, no, not at all. See the subtle logic it says, Nagarjuna uses. Consciousness reveals the world, you are saying, but the existence of consciousness is revealed by itself, not really. It's only when the consciousness shines on the mind and activities of the mind that not only the mind is known, the consciousness itself is also known. So both are rising and falling together. In deep sleep, there is no consciousness. No matter how much you Advaitins may argue after waking up, I was in deep sleep, I slept happily. All those things you are giving now, after the mind is working. It's when the mind is not working, there is no proof of consciousness and there's no proof of the mind also. Both rise and fall together. Then non-reciprocity. So mutual dependence, like we saw in the father and son case, it means the thing is false. Pramana produces prameya. The source of knowledge produces knowledge. If you think it's like a father and son, but they become mutually dependent. His commentator, Nagarjuna's commentator Chandrakirti, uses a nice example which you don't find in Vedanta. Bales of hay, which are tied together, sheaves of hay, they are leaning on each other. They are not dependent on one thing. They're not leaning on the ground. They all lean on mutually on each other. They're supporting each other. So they are mutually supporting. And if you remove one, the other also falls. So similarly, consciousness and the world, mutually supporting, subject and object, mutually supporting. You cannot say subject is the ultimate reality. Consciousness is the ultimate reality. They arise and fall together. Pramana, prameya. They rise and fall together. So these are his techniques. Final word, then I'll stop. What does it all mean? All of this. So this shunyata, emptiness, what does it mean? First option, nihilism. Shunya means nothing. Nothing exists. Who says this? Most of Nagarjuna's opponents, they say it. So even the Vedantasara we are studying, they'll say that Atma is Shunya. Nagarjuna says Atma is Shunya, means Atma does not exist. Shunya means non-existence. Now, most of the Advaitins, most of the Hindu philosophers like the Naiyayikas and the Mimamsakas who engaged with the Buddhists, they interpreted the Shunyavada as meaning as nihilism, as nothing exists. Now, this is a little unfair because Nagarjuna has himself clearly denied that we are not saying that nothing exists. So what, according to Nagarjuna, he says Shunyata means pratitya samutpada, the dependent originations. Things originate together and fall together. This happening, that happens. This not happening, that will not happen. This is the meaning of Shunyata. It's not nothing. Then if it's not nothing, then what does it mean? I also feel it's unfair to dismiss Nagarjuna as saying that nothing exists. It's a very, I would say it's a superficial position. Though we cannot outright deny that they were all wrong by saying that Shunyavada means nothing. Because how is it that all of them made the same mistake? Kumarila Bhatta, Shankaracharya, the great Nyayikas, Nyaya philosophers, all of them are saying, Nagarjuna is saying that nothing exists. Not only that, even more damaging, the great Buddhist philosopher Vasubandhu, whom we came across, Mind Only School, he also takes Nagarjuna as saying that nothing exists, nihilist. So it is not entirely unfair to say that Shunyavada means nothingness. But let us see. The other interpretation is Shunya means Brahman. Swami Sarvapriyananda says, what we call Purna, they call Shunya. What we call full, they call empty. How is that possible? The gold and ornament example I gave, just think about it. Gold in itself is empty of all ornaments. What does it mean? If you just think about gold itself. Is there a necklace in it? Is there a bracelet in it? Is there a ring or a tiara in it? No. If I ask you, in which part of gold is a necklace? Which portion of the gold is tiara? Nothing. You can say that. Those are names and forms. They are not parts. Whatever you touch will be gold itself. It is not as such. This part of the gold is a necklace. That part of the gold is a ring. You cannot say that's silly. So gold in itself is empty of all ornaments. So it's shunya in that sense. But does that mean gold is nothing? Not at all. Gold is the only reality. In all the ornaments, the only reality is gold. So gold is purna in that sense. Any other option? Here is one option which is unfortunately full of very fancy terms. So this is Professor Garfield, whose class I took at Harvard. His view, and he is a leading scholar of Madhyamaka Shunyavada in the world today. His view is, it's not nothing. He says, no, that's absolutely not true. And he will say, Swami, it is not your Brahman also. Satchidananda Brahma, it's not that also. Then what is Nagarjuna trying to say? What are the Shunyavadis trying to say? His answer is epistemic coherentism and ontological anti-foundationalism. What does that mean? It means, epistemic means pramana prameya, the sources of knowledge. They all work together. They establish things together. Ultimately, they are not real. So eyes will establish the form, and with your hands you can touch that form. With your nose you can smell the form, that rose. With your tongue you can taste the rose water. All the sense organs and their objects, they give you a coherent view of reality. But there is no underlying reality to any of it. That's what he calls anti-foundationalism. That there is an underlying reality which is appearing to you in this way. No. It all comes to, two examples he gave, money and Harvard University. He said, here is Harvard University. Which is the Harvard University here? This building, that building, are the buildings the Harvard University? Is the website the Harvard University? Are the students the Harvard University? A professor Harvard University? Is the syllabus Harvard University? Is the endowment Harvard University? Is it altogether Harvard University? He says, no, Harvard University is just what he calls a conceptual imputation, a term which is put here, and it's only in our minds that we see reality as this Harvard University. And apart from these things also, there is no Harvard University. These things taken together, they are not Harvard University. Individually also, they are not Harvard University. And apart from them also, there is no Harvard University. That's what he calls coherentism. Together, they form a picture. Practically, it works. Another example he gave is money. So the dollars and the coins and the dimes and the quarters, Is that money? So first there were dollars and quarters and dimes, and then money came? Not at all. So is the first there was money and then the dollars and not at all. They depend on each other. Like the sheaves of hay of Chandrakirti, they hang on each other, but there is no underlying reality to it. So what are you ultimately saying? He says it's like a bottomless well. You're thrown into it, and this neti neti goes on endlessly. You might say that's not a very satisfactory answer. Ultimately, is it nothing or something? That he will not say. So that's one option, slightly unsatisfactory. If you ask me, what is your take on it? Conclusion. I'll conclude here. My take on it is that both have been misunderstood, and both are good correctives to each other. Both means Advaita Vedanta and the Madhyamaka Shunyavada. The Advaita Vedanta is misunderstood when it talks about Brahman, Atman, Satchidananda. We get the feeling that there is some such thing, some ultimate reality called Satchidananda. Most of us, we get that feeling. Of course there is. No, that's a wrong way of understanding it. It's like saying that here are all these ornaments and gold is the ultimate reality. So if somebody thinks that gold is a very nice type of ornament, no, wrong. The opposite mistake is made when you attack Shunyavada by saying it means nothing. When they are denying it is neither this nor not this, nor a combination of this and not this, nor a denial of both the Chatushkoti Vinirmukta Tattvam. So does it mean nothing? No, not nothing. It's not nihilism. Then what are they both pointing towards? Advaita Vedanta and Madhyamaka Shunyavada. They're pointing towards the ultimate reality, which is what I like to call no thing. It's not nothing. Nothing exists, no. It's not a thing also. So it's no thing. Thing, you just imagine ornament, necklace. So if you're asking, if you're told gold is the ultimate reality. Now somebody says, so gold must be a very nice type of ornament. There is necklace, ring, there is a bracelet, and there is one more fourth type of ornament called gold, which is really great type of ornament. So no, it's not a type of ornament. It is not so. Then if somebody says, then gold is not there, the only reality is ornament. If you're saying gold is not an ornament, then there is no such thing as gold. Gold is no, that is also not true. It's not that gold is not there. In fact, gold is the only thing that is there. So it is not a thing, it is not nothing, it is no thing. What is that? What Nagarjuna calls Shunya, what we call Brahman, and both of us, we call Prapanchopashamam Shivam. Okay, I'm done. So this is just a little detour, and we are back. I promise I won't subject you to these things after later on. We will stick to the text from here onwards. Next, Advaita Vedanta, the hero of the play, will come in and demolish all these objections and establish Atman, Brahman as the ultimate reality and so on. Let's look at the activities going on the chat. Rick says, last week you said that the proponents of contradictory understandings of the self could all have been enlightened. I understand how enlightened people could disagree about politics or not know much quantum mechanics. But isn't enlightenment synonymous with self-realization, direct experience and intellectual understanding of the self? Shouldn't self-realized people agree about what they have realized? Again, yes and no. Yes and no. Take a bracelet or take a nice necklace, and there is somebody who loves it as a necklace, and there is the goldsmith who couldn't care less about the necklace, who just cares about the gold, and he insists it's gold. And the other person who understands that it's gold, but who loves gold as the necklace, insists that it's a necklace. But both of them, if they've truly understood, they know the gold nature of that. So by this, what I'm saying is, somebody knows the ultimate reality to be Satchidananda. And another person also knows that, but knows it as Vishnu or Narayana or my mother Kali. Now, it might seem that The person who says it is existence absolute and consciousness absolute, infinite bliss, that guy is realized. And this guy who's saying it is my divine mother Kali with 4 arms, this guy has not realized it. No, it could be exactly, they're talking about exactly the same thing. Could be. Punita ji is asking, who is negating? Here is one argument which will come next time. I remember when I was studying all these things 20 years ago, our professor of Indian philosophy, Nirod Baran Chakravarti, whom I mentioned, I think in my talk on Sunday, he was a disciple of Swami Abhedananda ji, and he used to teach us Western philosophy, but he was a master of Advaita Vedanta also. So I took my newfound enthusiasm for Nagarjuna. By the way, one of my masters in teachers in that training period, this Swami who was teaching us Nyaya philosophy, he nicknamed me the Shunyavadi, the emptiness guy, sort of sarcastically, because I always had emptiness arguments and I was a Nagarjuna enthusiast. Imagine, in the middle of a Hindu monastery. Anyway, so I took this enthusiasm to Professor Nirod Baran Chakravarti. He was a retired professor of philosophy. So I said, see, this is how you established emptiness. And your so-called consciousness, that only arises with the activity of the mind. So Nagarjuna's argument, the anti-self-reflexive argument, it arises with the mind and disappears with the mind. No amount of telling me that, no, it is just the mind which is gone and consciousness keeps on shining like the sun in deep darkness of space. This blank, this darkness because there's nothing to reflect consciousness. All of those you're just arguing like that. But experience shows that whenever there is the mind, there is consciousness. Whenever there's an object, there's a subject. Without the object, no subject. Without the subject, no object. And they arise and fall. So Nagarjuna's dialectic is devastating to your Advaita. What would you say? Shunya, void, is the ultimate reality. I still remember till today, 21 years ago, the old gentleman, he's shorter than me, but he had big eyes. He glared at me and he says, who sees the shunyam? Who is the witness of the shunya? What does that mean? This void, this emptiness is revealed to what or whom? What is the pramana for the emptiness? Immediately our answer, the Nagarjunan answer, will be that why can it not be that the one who realizes the emptiness is also empty? You see, the subject-object thing, the empty subject realizes in the empty object, realizes the emptiness of the object and realizes the emptiness of the subject. But there is a fatal mistake here. If you push further, you realize the emptiness of the world. Fine, Advaita Vedanta is fine with it. You realize the emptiness of the self. But what do you mean by the self? If you say, I realize the emptiness of body, fine. I realize the emptiness of mind, fine. I realize my own emptiness. I, the witnessing consciousness, realize my own emptiness. You are violating Nagarjuna's own principle of anti-self-reflexivity. Nagarjuna is finally caught. The most evasive and subtlest of philosophers is finally caught in his own trap. And it's not a trap he would want to avoid. I have a feeling he was pointing at this all along. That's what some of the Tibetan lamas would say. Not all. They would say Nagarjuna is actually pointing at this ultimate reality. They call it the clear light of the void, the witness of emptiness. Consciousness which illumines the emptiness of the universe. Even the apparent self also, the jiva. Jiva is also empty. Advaita agrees. Jiva is also empty. The sentient being is also empty. Only thing is, the Shunyavada, Madhyamaka Shunyavada, Tibetan Buddhists would not want you to say it. The moment you say it, they say, the moment you put it into language, consciousness illumining the emptiness, you're already making a mistake. And that language can be cut down again by Nagarjuna's dialectic. So don't say it. Realize it. Fine, we are fine with that. Vidyaranya Swami, in Panchadashi, He attacks the emptiness people sharply, the usual thing that the emptiness means nothingness. And finally, he says, but if you say by emptiness you mean the witness of this emptiness, welcome to our camp. That's what we are saying also. We are saying if emptiness is another name for Maya, there is no objective reality. And you're talking about the absolute. That's exactly what we are saying. And Vidyaranya Swami in Panchadashi is also humorous. In one place, he says, a debate requires two positions, Siddhanta and Purva Paksha, the debater and the one who's attacking. Now, I'm here, I'm championing Advaita, but you are empty by your own philosophy. You don't exist. So I can't debate you. So he's just being sort of tongue-in-cheek there. Then, so Punitaji, subtle and direct point, very good. We'll see more of that next time. If everything is shunya, does it not create a feeling of non-repercussion of any good or bad deeds? How does the regular individual process it? They will say just the opposite. They will say karma works because everything is shunya. If you had been they will say exactly the opposite. The Buddhists, they do that. If you say good and bad, karma, how will karma work if everything is empty? You say karma works only because things are empty. If you were a permanent, unchanging self, then karma couldn't affect you. They will say exactly the same thing. How will karma work if you are a permanent, unchanging self? Bad karma will not give you suffering. Good karma will not give you happiness. Karma will not work if you don't change. So karma works only if emptiness is true. But one big point I must mention, Nagarjuna was very big on the two truths. The two truths. Samvritti Satyam, Paramartha Satyam. There are two levels of truths. Nagarjuna says in the Mula Madhyama Kakarika, the Buddha taught two truths. Samvritti Satyam, which is transactional, the relative truth, the world. Yes, there are fathers and sons. Yes, fire illumines a pot. Yes, people walk. I'm not denying any of that. And ultimately, no, none of it is real. So, ultimate truth, relative truth. Samvritti Satyam, Paramartha Satyam. Exactly like Advaita Vedanta, Gaudapada 500 years after that, and Shankaracharya and others. Vyavaharika Satyam, Paramarthika Satyam. To explain any kind of absolutistic philosophy like this, you need two levels of truth. So karma will be Samritti Satyam, Vyavaharika Satyam. And Nagarjuna will insist, it's my theory of emptiness alone which makes karma possible. Dimitri says, is this a way to show that Maya is illusion, Brahman cannot be described by words? Exactly. Exactly. If you want to reduce all of which we talked today, is he talking about Maya? You'd say yes. That would be my answer to that, yes. They don't use that word, but that's what they're talking about. I asked Professor Garfield that the sense I'm getting is what I'm receiving today as a finished product from Advaita Vedanta. What we are reading here 1400, 1500 years ago, 2000 years ago, 3-4 centuries before Gaudapada, it's like visiting the construction site. You are living in this fantastic, comfortable apartment. But when you see this, you see the huge mess that's all around, an enormous activity that's going on, a change which is happening day after day. So it's the construction site of the finished philosophy which we see as Advaita Vedanta today and the Tibetan Buddhist synthesis of mind only and emptiness today. And Professor Garfield said, yeah, you could look at it that way. All these things which are going on, all these fights, that was the construction taking place. Today, what we are reading as, like a finished text like this, or similar texts Tibetan lamas would be reading today, they are like the finished product, the comfortable apartment you get to live in after all these fights have been gone through. Vishwanathan is asking, if he denies everything, then how is this philosophy beneficial to aspirants? If an aspirant accepts the claim that nirvana is shunyam, then is there any hope of transcending suffering? He would say exactly the opposite. It's only when you accept that there's no ultimate reality called nirvana, then there's no ultimate reality called samsara. There's no ultimate reality called suffering. And that will be the escape from suffering. Otherwise, if nirvana is a real thing, which is going to start, it will come to an end. If it's a real thing, then your suffering was also real, then samsara was also real, and there, from a real there is no escape. So he will say that. And similar arguments you find 500 years later in Gaudapada. Does the consciousness of Chama's hard problem correspond more to ahankara rather than pure consciousness, Atman? The hard problem, what it feels like from within, has two aspects, as Girish has noted carefully. The two aspects. Feels, first person is consciousness. It's a reflected consciousness in the ahankara. But feels like something. Already the object is present. So in first person experience, both are there together. And Gaudapada, Nagarjuna would immediately, he's an expert at finding tension. He knows wherever there is tension, he knows he can break it. He will use it, this fourfold logic, the tetralemma, Chatushkoti, to attack it. Kiran says, is Shunya the same as Mithya or Vedanta? Both. It is the same, according to Nagarjuna, it is the same as what Vedanta later, or Nagarjuna never said that, but it is the same as what Vedanta later calls Mithya. It's also the same as what Vedanta calls Brahman, Satyam. That's a very interesting thing. For Nagarjuna, Shunya is the ultimate reality. And the world is Shunya in the sense of empty, unreal, Mithya. The ultimate reality is Shunyam because it is empty of the world. The gold example I gave, notice, gold is Shunya of all ornaments. Gold in itself does not have any ornaments. But it is not unreal. It is not. It is the only reality, in fact. Nagarjuna, in a beautiful verse in Mula Madhyamaka Karika, he warns that Shunyata, do not misunderstand Shunyata as nothingness. He says, if you misunderstand Shunyata, he says, the solution for the sufferings of the world is Shunyata, emptiness. But those who take the Shunyata itself to be a reality, for them there is no help. You are trapped in samsara. You can be rescued by Shunyata. But if you catch on to Shunyata itself as a reality, for you there is no help. You are finished. He says this. And then he goes on, he gives an example. Yatha sarpo durgrihita. Catching a snake at the wrong end. Misunderstanding Shunyata is like that. Misunderstanding emptiness is like catching a poisonous snake at the wrong end. You're going to get bitten. And that will be the end of your spiritual life. Alpana says, all this makes sense after self-realization. But what does he suggest us to do or think? You know, this is what I had thought. I still remember in Belur Math as a novice, very excited about Nagarjuna, telling another novice, we're sitting for dinner at night. And I'm sure I made like a nuisance of myself going on and on about Nagarjuna. And I was talking about Nagarjuna, and this other brahmachari, novice, very perceptive. He said, it sounds like a madman who's climbed to the top of the house, and then he tosses away the ladder, and he says, come, jump, come up here. So yes, that's what it feels like. He has attained the reality, and he's telling you as it is. But how do you go up there? But if you actually go to Tibetan Buddhism, they have a wealth of techniques. If you take up the techniques, you will come to this realization. But the techniques are all repetition of mantra, of meditation, of mindfulness. Yantras are there, endless rituals are there. It's just like devotional Hinduism in many ways. It's just like Patanjali yoga. All of those things are there, the techniques, but it will go to that level. Shunyavada, Shravani says, Shunyavada reminds me of Ajatavada. Yet they are not the same. It reminds you of Ajatavada, it reminds me of Ajatavada also. And many, many great philosophers, it reminds them of Ajatavada. Like Vidushekar Bhattacharya, whom I mentioned, he is notorious for saying that Gaudapada borrowed everything from Nagarjuna. So Nikhilanandaji, in his translation of the Mandukya Karika, he spends a lot of energy in refuting that. But there's no reason to refute. A great teacher in India wrote to me last year saying that we're running into a trouble, that clearly Advaita seems to have borrowed a lot from the Shunyavada Madhyamaka. Now, it's a problem only if you think it's a problem. In those days, all these schools interacted intensely with each other and they absorbed each other's DNA. And so the ultimate system which you get in Advaita Vedanta is fully based on Upanishads. It's an Upanishadic Siddhanta, conclusion of the Upanishadic teachings. But a lot of terminology, a lot of argumentation, a lot of techniques, many of the techniques which Nagarjuna used to defeat the Nyaya school in Vigraha Vyavartini, almost verbatim Shankara uses to attack the Nyaya school. So it is part of the DNA of Advaita now. What is the purpose of sadhana according to Nagarjuna? It is to remove the error, just like Advaita Vedanta. Maya, the term they don't use, but they accept the same concept. Shubhrata is saying, looks like Gaudapada incorporated Buddha's Shunyavada into his Karika. That's a view of many scholars. At least the approach, the methodology, terminology, and logic is very Buddhistic. If you read Madhyamaka Karika and Mandukya Karika together, you cannot escape the echoes. They're clearly different. One is Upanishadic and talks about an ultimate reality. The other one denies. But the terms, the techniques, the logical arguments, they seem like mirror images of each other. Rama says very similar to Gaudapada, no bondage, no liberation, no karma, no causality. Absolutely. Niyant says, do Advaita and Shunyavada agree on neither annihilation nor eternal, since both say the truth is beyond time? Correct. One might think Advaita Vedanta is talking about an eternal reality, something that persists through time. Not really. Advaita Vedanta says Brahman is eternal, Brahman is all-pervading. But it's all-pervading when you accept space. Then Brahman is all-pervading. Brahman is eternal only when you accept time. Then it's all-pervading, then it's eternal. But both space and time are Maya. Apart from space and time, what is the meaning of saying all-pervading and eternal? Not at all. It does not mean anything. That's why Nagarjuna is right, is thoroughgoing. Any positive statement you make about the ultimate reality will be taking some support of something false, something within Maya. Otherwise, language cannot work. Shiva Priya is saying goal is to separate mind from Atman. Yes, but that is a Sankhyan idea, separation of the mind and the Atman. That approach Shunyavada does not use. Krishnamurti says, ultimate origination of Pramana, can't Shruti be cited? Knowledge originated from Brahman itself? Yes, that's a dualistic Hindu view. Shruti is cited, but then it will not work with the Buddhists. They don't accept the Shruti. Epistemic coherentism sounds like Sat Asat Anirvachaniyam. Yes, correct again. All right. Peter says Shunyam Adhyatmikam. Correct, very beautiful. Shunyam Adhyatmikam Pashya Shunyam Bahirgatam Navidyate Sopi Kaschid To Bhavayato Shunyatam Yo Bhavayati Shunyam. Where is this from, Peter?
Namaskaram. It's quoted by Vidushekhara Bhattacharya, and he says it's from Madhyamaka Vritti by Chandrakirti. It's quoted by de la Poussin, I think, in a book from the 19th century.
Right.
But I believe it's quite a famous shlokam in Tibetan Buddhism itself. Because I heard it from a Tibetan Buddhist also.
All right. Because there is a corresponding verse in Mandukya Karika.
Yeah, and that's exactly when he quotes it, right? So in Bhattacharya's book on Gaudapada, he gives it in a footnote under the Tattvam, it's at the end of the second or third chapter, right? The last verse.
Right. Tattvam adhyatmikam dishtva. Tattvam dishtva. In fact, it's fascinating. Not just the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, but some others like the Lankavatara Sutra and others. If you read some of the Mahayana texts along with the Mandukya Karika, it's an eerie feeling, like you're seeing a ghost double. Just one word changed here and there, but it's almost like an echo of the same verse. Swami Vivekananda, he said, the Buddha was a sannyasi of the Vedanta, which sounds absolutely contrary and counterintuitive. But when you come to something like this, it doesn't sound so counterintuitive at all. All right. I'm glad. I hope you liked it. I enjoyed myself. So next time we'll be back on course and we'll see what the Advaitin has to say to all of this. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.